then they feel loved, accepted, and like they belong. And this is our very goal for the people that we serve at Covenant Health, and it's written right into our mission statement. We are called to continue the healing ministry of Jesus by serving with compassion, upholding the sacredness of life at all stages, and caring for the whole person, body, mind, and soul.
Thanks so much, Lynn. That's great. Sorry about the age difference. That's funny because today somebody, you know how Facebook flashes up memories. So this picture flashed up of me and my grandkids, and the oldest one just graduated last year. So it was a picture of them when they were like 3 and 2, and then I've got this one knowing that they're now 18. So sorry about the age difference.
No worries at all. Very fun.
All right. Thank you for that great reflection. And I'm going to introduce our presenters today. We have 2 presenters, and I'll introduce them both, and then they can take over their presentations and pass it off to each other. So the first presenter is Eleanor Stewart, our clinical ethicist. Eleanor holds a doctorate in rehab medicine with a focus on healthcare ethics. She was awarded a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada doctoral fellowship for her research on ethical practice. In 2019, she was also awarded the Covenant Health Mission Award for Social Justice. Eleanor's interest in ethics grew from her experience working with children and families living with complex neurodevelopment disabilities. She became involved in the ethics community as a member of the ethics committee at the Glenrose Rehab Hospital and member of her professional association in college. Eleanor has 2 daughters, a cat, a dog, and she loves her beautiful garden. Our second presenter today is Linda Chow Turner. Linda Chow Turner is a distinguished senior healthcare leader of over 30 years, and she's dedicated to service across the continuum of healthcare, both in public and private sectors. As a registered dietitian with a master's degree in business admin, Linda brings a unique blend of clinical expertise and strategic acumen to her role. Throughout her career, Linda has demonstrated extensive experience in leading and operating a wide range of services, including rural acute, mental health, addictions, seniors housing and living, capital management, emergency and disaster management, protective services, and hospitality services. Her comprehensive understanding of clinical and non-clinical operations has been instrumental in driving organizational success and improving patient outcomes. As a systems thinker and innovator and proven team builder, Linda is passionate about fostering a culture of excellence and collaboration. So I thank you both in advance for sharing your knowledge with us. And Eleanor, you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Well, welcome, everybody. I hope that I can be heard. I had
Yes,
some
hear you.
Yeah, good. So I had some technical difficulties today, so I'm a little on the nervous side about that. And welcome. I'm glad to see some new people and some faithful participants that makes me feel comfortable when I know that I know some of the people who are here. So compassion, we know that compassion is one of our leading values in Covenant Health, but we are not exclusive owners of this idea. So I am going to share with you today some thoughts from philosophy about compassion. And so we in Catholic healthcare use the Health Ethics Guide in our, to guide us in our deliberations, but just even in everyday interactions. So this is the reference that we use, and it is the word compassion appears in a number of places. So you will see it, there's a whole section beginning at the very beginning of the Health Ethics Guide. There's a section called Loving Compassion and the Healing Relationship, the context of ethical reflection. Then further on, you see a whole section called Responding to the Gospel Call for Compassion and Healing Service. And then also in that introductory chapter, the call to compassion and ethical reflection. So this is obviously a really important idea of the compassion that we refer to often. And throughout the Health Ethics Guide, you will see that compassion is brought up again in a number of sections about mental health, about palliative care, about end of life, organ donation, and even in governance and administration. So it is throughout the Health Ethics Guide. But though we talk about it in Catholic healthcare, we know that we don't have the exclusive sort of rights to this idea, and you will see compassion talked about in different ways from many different traditions. So I've just given a few examples, and we see here that compassion is not condescending kindness. It is passionate engagement with everything around you. In separateness lies the world's greatest misery. In compassion lies the world's true strength. And lastly, compassion is the radicalism of our time. I think that's a good one to keep on a little card somewhere to remind myself. So what is compassion? So you can Google it, and of course we all do that. I did that even in preparation. So, but I offer three here, and I'm going to talk about each one of them. So the first one is compassion is the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. So earlier we heard from Lynn, and you can hear echoes of what Lynn said in this. The second one is a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. And then lastly, sympathetic pity and concern for the suffering or misfortune of others. So I want to draw your attention to the first two. You can see that it's not just the feeling, it's a call to action. So you feel motivated. You're not just sitting in, oh, that's, I feel so sorry for that person. The last one, where it says sympathetic pity, this one doesn't call for action, but I want to draw your attention to the word sympathetic pity. In philosophy, there is a line drawn between sympathy, pity, and compassion. And they are, there's been a great deal of thought given to them, and they are seen as different. The interesting thing about the word pity is that up until the Victorian era, the word pity was synonymous with the understanding that we have today of compassion. So if you are the sort of person who likes to read historical texts, you will see the word pity, but it is intended in the way that we use compassion. So that's just a note for you. But compassion is a concept that crosses many, many borders. Certainly, I having been trained in philosophy, I'm familiar with it from that perspective, but certainly theologians have a great deal to say about compassion, as do psychologists when they're looking at moral psychology. So they've all weighed in. It's a crowded field in philosophy. You get folks who really feel that the concept of compassion has something to offer us when we are, interacting with each other and when we have problems with each other. And there are those that say, no, emotions have no place in ethical thinking. So here, I've just given you a list of folks that are known to have written on compassion in philosophy. And I'm most particularly going to focus on Martha Nussbaum. So, I could have gone the route of talking about compassion as an emotional, what would be called a religious emotion, but instead I'm just taking it away from that to see sort of an area that you might not be so familiar with, which is in secular philosophy. So the most important recent book, not maybe so recent, I guess I say that because of my age, but anyway, in the 1990s, Martha Nussbaum wrote a book called Upheavals of Thought, The Intelligence of Emotions. So Martha Nussbaum is her sort of source that she refers to is Aristotle. She is known as someone who thinks a lot about what Aristotle had to say. So there are a couple of important points that come up in her book and have continued in her thought that around compassion. So compassion is a prerequisite moral emotion for a lot of social life. And in that, what she's pointing to is the fact that compassion takes us out of ourselves and gives us concern for others. So it's a moral emotion because it connects us to others and has the effect of guiding action out of that source. And she rejects the divide between compassion and reason. So you probably are familiar that a lot of Western philosophy focuses on rationality and reason, and puts aside emotions and feels that emotions are irrational. So Nussbaum is saying, no, there's some wealth in a moral, in this idea of compassion. So, and further to that, she says, if you really think about compassion, you realize that it has a cognitive component. And I'm going to say more about that. And lastly, and really important to us working in healthcare and human services, is that compassion can be learned. So if we think of compassion in the sort of realm of not an ethical principle, but rather a virtue, when we think in virtue, we're talking about a person's character. And following from Aristotle, what Martha Nussbaum is saying, well, character can be built, right? So through practice, in the way that an athlete builds their strength through practice. So that is sort of a flavor of where she's going with that. So this is a quote that I found useful because it sums up sort of her view that compassion is important to our social life. Compassion is a crucial part of interpersonal knowledge. Compassion in the philosophical tradition is a central bridge between the individual and the community. It is conceived of as our species' way of hooking the interest of others into our own personal goods. So we'll say more about that soon. So the cognitive component, so this is the sort of piece that's a little bit, that her critics might go after. She believes that there's a certain sort of reasoning in compassion, and that in order to trigger compassion, you are internalizing a representation of the world and what the emotional response to that would be. So there's some cognitive processing going on here, meaning that, in all ways that we do this, we represent the world outside of ourselves in our brain, in through our cognition. And we know that while emotions and reactions might originate deep in the brain, by the time they reach the the frontal cortex, you're getting some processing now. And we know that's the part of the brain that's the executive functioning. So that sort of processing involved here. And her comment about this is intelligent response to perceptions of value, like a value judgment understood as some kind of cognitive state that allows us to discover values and reasons. So what I mean by that is you have a response or a reaction to something. And and when that happens to you, that sort of gut feeling, if you pause, you can reflect on why. Why do I feel that way? And I know that in the process of doing our ethics consults, when we have an ethical framework that we work through, one of the first questions that my colleague John often asks is, what's your gut reaction? What's your gut feeling here? And that's not just to say, well, I feel this way or that way, and then to put that aside. Rather, it's an opportunity to say, okay, I feel really uncomfortable with this. Why? Why do I feel uncomfortable with this? So that's that reflection on what is the value that is being activated there. So as I said before, Martha Nussbaum is an Aristotelian. So she goes back to his work. And in Aristotle's work, he writes that compassion rests on three beliefs about suffering. And the first one is that the suffering is serious. It's not trivial. So compassion's not going to be activated if I have computer problems, as like I did this morning. It's, oh, sorry, Eleanor, you had computer problems. But it's not sort of the compassion that will arise in that situation. So the suffering is serious and it's not trivial. The second is that the suffering is not self-inflicted. So meaning that it's the circumstances that led to the suffering that I have. So we can, that's easy to see in the work that we do when we encounter somebody who has a brain tumor, right? So that's not self-inflicted. So compassionate, so it meets this, we have that belief that's not self-inflicted. So we can put aside any blame or anything like that because we can see that this person has no fault in this. However, that's probably not going to be enough because sometimes people, and we know this from the work that we do that's guided by trauma-informed notions, that this person in front of you today might be a heavy drinker, right? And you could say, well, that's self-inflicted. These health consequences of heavy drinking, they're self-inflicted. But if you take a step back, as we do, as we're encouraged to do, you start to see that, okay, the immediate action looks self-inflicted. However, there's a series of traumas that led to this, right? The other thing too is in suffering that's not self-inflicted, there's the other idea that is in this that Nussbaum goes to, is that even if the person himself is to blame, the punishment or the suffering might not be proportional. So proportionality is another idea that we use, and it's referenced in the Health Ethics Guide. So, somebody may have done something that impaired their health, but what actually happened in the end was far disproportionate to the action that they themselves might have taken. So that's what we mean there. The third piece is that suffering can happen to anyone in similar ways. So this is from Aristotle, and Nussbaum also agrees with this. She extends it a little bit, though, too, because we often recognize that something can happen to me just as it's happened to you, but there are certain um, situations, circumstances, places in the world where things happen, terrible things happen to people, and we can't even imagine, right? So, how are we going to bridge that gap? And be able to understand so that we have that belief that extends to compassion. So I'll say a little bit more about that later. But Aristotle and Nussbaum and others see that these are sort of the three that are necessary for the emotion of compassion. So, what's really important to us in healthcare and those of us who are educators is, can it be taught? And Aristotle once said that if you want to be a virtuous person, just hang out with virtuous people. That was his solution to the question of whether virtue like compassion can be taught. But Jean-Jacques Rousseau is one who took up this question. And here is a quote from his work. Surrendering omnipotence is essential to compassion, and to a broad compassion for one's fellow citizens is essential to a decent society. So, this goes back to the idea that compassion is a social sort of a social I'm sorry, I'm a lost for word there, but it's not just singular. It has to do with community. And Nussbaum, of course, agrees and says we can improve our capacity for compassion through reflective experiences. So she's a big one on stories. Because she's a Greek scholar, she likes to use a lot of the Greek myths and everything to tell her stories. But we're more familiar with the parables that Jesus offered. And in fact, the parable of the Good Samaritan is in the Health Ethics Guide. And the word compassion is used as it is used in the Gospel according to Luke. So that's very interesting because it means that, we know stories matter, and we know that stories teach us. And even in our health ethics guide, we offer a story that tells us about compassion. So that leads into sort of, there was a trend, and I think it continues to introduce humanities into the training of medical students and other healthcare professionals. I have to say, in my experience, it didn't occupy a whole lot of space. Sometimes the professors would just point to a book or an article, a story written and say, if you're interested. But in recent decades, it's been taken seriously. And for the reasons of cultivating compassion, which is important in healthcare and human services. So what do books do? They acquaint us with bad things that can happen in life. And the other thing that can happen when we are reading or taking in any form of arts, theater, music, etc., is that it suspends our knowledge of our own position, right? It allows us to do what some would call participatory imagination. So we get into and we connect with the character. And the book here on the side, I just wanted to offer that one is because some of us will remember a book from our youth that made a difference, that really impacted, and we return to it in, at times. And for me, it was The Hiding Place. I think I was maybe 12, maybe 13 when I read that. And the other day I was in a used bookstore, no surprise to my friends that I was in a used bookstore or a bookstore of any sort. And I saw a copy, which I picked up because I've long since lost my original copy of The Hiding Place. But in offering that to you, I would invite you to start thinking about what book might you have read that had that kind of impact, that acquainted you with the bad things that can happen in life and suspended your knowledge of your own position. By the way, this idea of suspending your knowledge of your own position, Nussbaum talks about that because she refers to John Rawls. John Rawls is really an important figure in ethics. He introduced the idea of the veil of ignorance. So in policy making or making decisions about other people, he talks about you are put in a position where you don't know who you are, so that you can make a decision for others. I'm not explaining it quite as well as I should, but it's called the original position, the veil of ignorance. And indeed, I believe that the medical humanities offer that opportunity. So we do, we talk about compassion, but is there such a thing as too much compassion? And Aristotle addressed that too, because he was talking about the various virtues or character building, and offered prudence. And so prudence will keep a true virtue in place. So you be good or be virtuous, but with prudence. So another way to think about that is to be discerning. Right. So the golden mean, which is another idea from Aristotle, there's perfect compassion where you be totally compassionate. And we know that that leads to burnout. Or at the other end, you have minimal compassion. You blame the individual or you pity them, but there's no call to action there. So what we're seeking is that middle ground. And again, prudence helps us to get there. Limited compassion, though, might not just be, a personal characteristic. Indwelling does have its limit because it requires a lot of knowledge of the other person or of others. We can be dulled by habit. I think that those of us who work clinically, eventually, we sort of like, oh, we've seen this before. Oh, same as last time. Oh, this is what we do, as we've always done, that kind of thing. So we can be dulled by habit. And compassion, though, can be diminished by the environment. I think that we are all very aware of that right now. And indeed, the environment is more likely to limit compassion than the lack of role models. And that's what we find from the research. And also compassion can be limited because of the entrenched structures of power, that we have a hard time stepping out of that. So compassion, lastly, is linked to quality of life. And we know that people vary in their needs for resources, but there are basic capabilities that we know are associated with human flourishing being a word that we use in Covenant Health, but others might, it's adjacent to the idea of quality of life. And compassion, if used wisely, does lead to in an egalitarian direction, meaning that we would give to those who need what they need, right? Rather than equally treating, or, equal distribution. Oops, sorry. So lastly, I just want to offer, these are some questions to ponder, and we are going to, we'll post these before we go to our small group sessions. And the last one for me is, in what way can compassion inform our institution? And I don't occupy a sort of position where I necessarily get the total view of things or the broad view of things. And for that reason, I really felt that it was important to speak to a leader. And I chose Linda Chow Turner because to me, I felt and I see Linda as a compassionate leader. But of course, Linda is probably going to deflect that to another, which is fine too, introducing us to yet another compassionate leader. So these are the questions that we will be discussing. As you probably know, at the Ethics Center, we have lots of books and resources and discussion groups. There's a lot more to be said about compassion in the philosophical vein, but there's also the last workshop that we had in in January. We started off our workshop series, with a look at compassion from Dr. Shane Sinclair, who runs the Compassion Lab at the University of Calgary. So you might want to take a look and on our website and see the recording that Dr. Sinclair presented in. And yeah, so we, you all know how to contact us, I suppose, if you're here, but here's a slide that gives you that general information that you can share with others. And now I'd like to turn it over to Linda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very much a pleasure and an honor to be here today, to be able to speak a little bit about compassionate leadership. So my name is Linda Chow-Turner, and I'm the Senior Operating Officer for Rural Acute Mental Health and Addictions for Covenant Health. I'm proud to share that I have over 30 years of service with this organization in various leadership roles. I was honored when Eleanor asked me to speak on compassionate leadership. In my day-to-day interactions with people, including staff, physicians, and patients, or when I'm managing difficult situations, addressing interpersonal conflicts, and planning improvement changes, I've always strived to live Covenant's values of stewardship, collaboration, social justice, respect, integrity, and compassion. So, what does compassionate leadership look like for me? Well, it includes offering help to someone in need. This is meant, for example, going in on my day off to support a staff member because they're going to be implementing a new system or new process. Or it might mean offering other types of help, such as helping a deceased staff member's family with planning a site-based memorial for their parent. Volunteering for a cause. I volunteer my time, skills, and efforts for causes that I believe in. At work, I volunteer to support events that build staff's sense of belonging. And outside of work, I volunteer with community service organizations like Edmonton Meals on Wheels and my local community league. Listening and being patient with others. I'll take the time to listen to someone to talk, let's say they want to talk about the recent challenges, or give someone more time to work on a project due to personal difficulties that I'm aware of. Forgiving others. Empathy allows me to understand their experiences. However, compassion drives me to take action by extending forgiveness so that I can be objective, seek to understand through active listening and without judgment to hopefully achieve the best outcome possible for both parties given the situation. When I reflect on my experiences, I have found the most difficult or challenging situations that in those cases that being compassionate usually leads to the best outcomes. And on that note, let's look at what we'll cover on the topic this morning. Our agenda for the day: core principles of compassionate leadership. Why is it important and why does it matter? Some practical steps in terms of achieving it. We did a small spotlight on compassionate leadership in action. We'll have just a really small group discussion, and then we'll finish. So, what is the definition of compassionate leadership? Eleanor has provided us, and Lynn has also provided us some really great food for thought in terms of what is compassion. I'm going to speak specifically about compassionate leadership. Compassionate leadership is about inspiring, supporting, and motivating others through empathy and understanding. It's especially critical in healthcare because it directly influences patient outcomes, improves team morale, and fosters collaboration. So today, we're going to explore what it means to be a compassionate leader and how it transforms healthcare environments. So let's start with the core principles of compassionate leadership. First, empathy is about truly understanding the emotions of others by actively listening. Reserve judgment, seek to understand, and leave people feeling heard and understood. Pay attention. reflect, withhold judgment, clarify, summarize, and share. Presence means being fully engaged during your interaction. One of the most crucial steps to being present is eliminating distractions. Put away your phone, turn off notifications, and find a quiet space where we can focus solely on the conversation at hand. By removing distractions, you will demonstrate respect and show the other person that they have your undivided attention. Courage involves addressing tough situations with honesty and vulnerability. Simon Sinek, a well-known inspirational speaker, says, courage. It takes courage to speak truth to power. It takes courage to admit you don't know something. It takes courage to admit you made a mistake. It takes courage to have a difficult conversation. It takes courage to step into discomfort. Integrity is leading with transparency and fairness. And finally, collaboration focuses on fostering teamwork and shared decision-making. These principles form the foundation of compassionate leadership in healthcare. So, why does compassionate leadership matter? Compassionate leadership is essential in healthcare for several reasons. It improves patient care by setting a tone of empathy and respect. It reduces burnout by prioritizing staff well-being. It enhances team dynamics by fostering trust and collaboration. And finally, it can lead to cultural transformation, encouraging others to adopt a similar compassionate approach. These benefits highlight why compassion isn't just a nice to have, but a necessity in healthcare leadership. Compassion and empathy are both important characteristics that can support positive interpersonal relationships. Empathy fosters understanding, helping people to connect on an emotional level. This plays a crucial role in establishing trust, intimacy, and social support. Compassion is often viewed as a step beyond empathy. It focuses on taking action and alleviates distress in ways that benefits others and the self. Instead of feeling powerless, people feel less distressed, more capable, and more positive about their ability to change the world around them. So, what are some practical steps to achieving compassionate leadership? First, cultivate a self-awareness by reflecting on your leadership style. Prioritize active listening to truly understand your team's needs. Empower and support others by recognizing contributions and providing growth opportunities. Model resilience and balance by demonstrating healthy work habits. Lastly, encourage feedback and adaptability by creating safe spaces for dialogue. These steps make compassion actionable in your daily leadership. Our ability to emphasize and respond with compassion to each other is one of our most precious capacities and capabilities, and it's hardwired into us. However, when we're stressed, our ability to be compassionate can be impacted. Most of us have experienced how, when we're under pressure, facing deadlines, worried about finances, or dealing with a conflict, are less than sympathetic with our colleagues, clients, or family. If we are intentional about being compassionate, we're able to more readily recognize when another person is hurt or afraid. We're able to feel with them, and with that, compassion naturally rises. I am fortunate to have worked with many compassionate leaders in my career. Let's look at a real life example. Carrie McMillan is a senior healthcare leader who brings a passion for mentorship, research, and ongoing quality improvement to her role. As a registered nurse, she serves as the senior operating officer for the Greylands Community Hospital. She pursued healthcare, nursing, and eventually leadership because she loves people. She enjoys being with people and helping with the hope of being compassionate and understanding. Karen's compassionate leadership is an inherent part of her personality. She strongly believes in actively listening and understanding the biases and needs in difficult situations. She emphasizes the importance of self-care and seeking support from mentors to help her manage her emotional well-being, particularly after challenging situations and interactions. Karen stresses that healthcare leaders must prioritize their health and family to be able to lead compassionately. She encourages new healthcare leaders to focus on understanding the needs of others and to engage in open communication. When asked for her recommendations on developing leadership skills, she suggested taking negotiation and communication courses. These courses are valuable resources for enhancing leadership abilities, as they can foster better understanding and relationships in healthcare settings. Karen shared a challenging experience with a patient and her son when they had to navigate complex family dynamics while ensuring the patient's autonomy and maintaining compassion. The son would allow the care team to proceed with what they felt was necessary to help his mother. However, he would then remove her IVs or take her off the oxygen. Karen met with the mother to try to understand her better, but noted that English was her second language and her son was acting as the interpreter. Karen felt that the team as a whole didn't understand what the mother wanted because the son was interpreting and his actions seemed odd to the team. They needed to administer antibiotics and keep her on oxygen, among other things, to help her recover. They eventually brought in a professional interpreter and asked the son to leave the room. The son was reluctant to leave, but they explained to him that he could stay if he allowed them to speak directly with his mother without his interference. Despite this, the situation remained challenging because it became clear that the mother and son were very intertwined. It turned out that the son was following his mother's instructions to remove the IV and stop the oxygen because she didn't like the feeling of it, even though the medical team had tried to explain that these measures were there for her health and recovery. Karen found it difficult to balance compassion and understanding with the need to ensure the patient received proper medical care. Ultimately, it was determined that the mother was competent and she had the right to make her own decisions. If she directed her son to remove the IVs and stop the oxygen, and he understood her wishes, the medical team had to respect her autonomy. Throughout the process, they had assumed the son was making the decisions, but it was actually the mother. Ensuring the patient understood the consequences of her choices was crucial. This experience was one of the hardest Karen has faced recently, knowing what needed to be done from a medical perspective, but having to respect the patient's autonomy. In the end, by seeking to understand and through active listening, did Karen and the team learn what it was that the patient wanted. Now, I'd love to hear from you. If you could share an example of a compassionate leader you've encountered or how you practice compassion in your role. The goal here really is just to spend a little bit of, a minute or two, just to provide some space for you to reflect and then learn from each other. And if you wouldn't mind putting up your hand to if you're going to, or actually just unmute yourself, that would be fantastic.
I can share, Linda.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Cease.
I think of John Gilchrist as a very compassionate leader. I just had hip surgery last year, and he was just absolutely wonderful in terms of listening to my needs and supporting me to take the time I needed to heal well, when we know that there's like limited resources on the team at the Ethics Center and everybody had to work extra hard while I was gone. So not just a compassionate leader, but a really compassionate team. And I think that's as a result of John's leadership. He encourages that from everybody on the team.
Thank you for sharing, Cease. Oh, okay. Oh, and from that was, I'm sorry. I don't know if folks can see in the chat, but that was just John saying thank you. Very kind words. All right. Well, I'm not going to put anyone else on the spot. Thank you very much.
I have something.
Oh, perfect. Okay, go ahead.
It's Greg Humbert here, and I'm a volunteer, a chair of an ethics committee in a small hospital in Northern Ontario. And of course, we are dealing more and more with requests for MAID. and again, our hospital is a very small hospital. And we do discuss this often in our ethics committee meetings. And we also, of course, have docs and nurses who are very much agreeable with MAID and have struggles with us as a Catholic hospital not offering it. Now, we do everything we can to transfer, to honor the wishes of people, to move them where they can receive the care that they want. But I guess the question I'm asking is, we've had some meetings where, of course, there's been tension because of differences of opinion. And we want to all both have compassion for each other as people who want to serve. But do you have any little help that ways in which we can sort of bridge that gap as we try to respect each other?
That's a really good question, Greg, and thank you for sharing. And I think that if it's all right with you, I think we'll save that for the group discussion. I think that's a perfect example of how can compassion be in some of our more difficult situations. Is that all right, Greg?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for sharing. And I think over here. So just to wrap things up, compassionate leadership is vital for improving patient outcomes, supporting healthcare teams, and fostering a positive workplace culture. I encourage you to reflect on your own leadership style and commit to practicing compassion in your daily interactions. By doing so, you're going to inspire others to lead with empathy, creating a ripple effect of positive change. Remember, compassion in healthcare isn't just a value, it's a necessity for creating lasting impact. Thank you. And I think it's back over to Cease or someone else.
All right. Thank you both for your presentations. They were very thought-provoking and lots of really great information. We're going to start with moving into our small group discussions. I don't know, Oge, were you able to pop the questions in the chat box?
I'll put it right away.
Okay. And Oge will organize the chat boxes, or the meeting rooms. You'll see a little thing on your screen, and you'll just accept, and we'll be in different breakout rooms, and then we will have our discussions, and we'll come back and share what we've talked about. I think we have 20 minutes for our discussions, which will give us about 10 minutes to come back to the larger group.
CISA, actually, we've expanded that to 30 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Lots of time. There are 4 questions.
Okay. So how long do we have this session for?
Till 1 o'clock.
Till 1 o'clock. Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Cute.
Can we see my screen?
I can.
Yes.
All right, so these are the questions that Eleanor wanted us to ponder on. I'll be throwing them one after the other into the groups as you go in. And I've rated the rooms. There might be about 5 or 6 people in each room. I'm hoping that we can all participate. Thank you.
Thanks, Oge.
You're welcome.
So we're all back together again, and we've had a lot of people had to head out because they have busy days. So we've got about 18 people with us now. So I'm not sure how many people were in each of the groups. My group just had Linda Chow Turner and myself, so we had a great conversation about many different things. But let's get some feedback from the groups and hear some conversation from what the other groups had to say. Anybody want to volunteer? Should I just ask people?
I volunteered.
Thank you, Sally.
Sally. Our group, we had 2 retired people. I think I'm the longest retired, and another one, and 2 active people in the trenches. And we were able to see that root of compassion grew very early, the one that's in our hearts. It came to us in childhood experiences. It came also during adulthood to be more deepened whenever we saw people who lived what they spoke with integrity and compassion. And I found it very open, speaking from the heart and talking about our own growth and our value of compassion in healthcare. Great experience.
Thank you, Sally. That's great. Anybody else?
Okay. Ellie. So yeah, I really enjoyed the group of folks that I was with. So thank you very much, Sharon, John, and Greg. So we indulged my passion for books fairly early on when we started this, and just like you said, Sally, sometimes it's a book that we read in childhood, which is what Sharon shared with us. A story of going to the Scholastic Book Fair, which we're all familiar with, and without really any knowledge, picking up a book about Helen Keller and how that led to her awareness of, how people struggle, and also Sharon attributes it to inspiring her to nursing. So, that's a good example of an early childhood influence and a triggering of that compassion. Also, John and Greg had many more contemporary examples of that. And so I ended up writing down a new list for myself of books. And because John is pursuing a career in pastoral care, there's a long list of books. Greg offered 2 books that I think I will follow up on that were written by people with mental health problems. And one of them was Marsha Lanahan, and many of us know her because she's an she's the person who dialectical therapy, is that right? I think she's the originator.
How to be successful with borderline people.
Yeah,
people not yet matured into themselves, so they get called borderline.
Yeah, and so she's written a book about her own journey called A Life Worth Living. And then another book that Greg pointed out was about an individual with bipolar, and this book is titled, Is There No Place on Earth for Me? And so I'm going to follow up on those. Some life experiences that people have are so very hard for us to imagine. But I feel it's my duty to inform myself in the ways that through medical humanities, so that in situations I have a better ability to be compassionate. So, and our folks in our group, one was a nurse, one, as I said, studying to become a chaplain, and the third person also working in the hospital. So, we talked about that. We actually shared some really touching stories about people that we saw who demonstrated compassion. It's there if you look around for it. And as Aristotle would suggest, hang out with those people if you want to be compassionate. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Sally. That's great. I love that you got into the book discussion right away. Love it. I see that Oge has put the link for the survey in the chat box. So if you guys want to give us some feedback, please do that. Is there someone else who would like to speak on behalf of their group? Okay, how many groups were there?
There are 5.
5. Okay, so we've got
Yeah.
2 so far. Anybody else?
Maybe our representatives of those groups have left. I don't know.
Maybe they have.
Mhm, mhm.
Sally represented our group very well, so we cannot follow. Yeah, I very much enjoyed that.
Mhm.
Well, Linda and I had a conversation about from the perspective of being leaders and just how important that self-reflection part of compassion is in terms of being a leader when, you know, people that are not happy, they will come at you and blame you and how that can be quite hard and challenging as a leader to not take that on personally, and how important it is to always be able to, in those situations, take a step back and you know, take a breath and really seek to understand what that person is trying to say to you and really hear what they're trying to say to you, and then also the importance of having like-minded people to go back to and have for a support group as a leader. That it's really important that there's people in your, like, that you have peeps that you can go back to and that are compassionate with you in during those difficult times. I wondered if there was any discussion about Eleanor, I always find it challenging, that comment that compassion can be learned. If anyone had any thoughts on that they'd like to share.
But I thought our group sharings demonstrated that. We witnessed it, saw the effects, and felt invited towards that. Maybe some was books, but also real life examples. Our group was great with real life examples. So I you know, could be learned from anyone that you are with if your eyes are there to see it. So no, that's the key, and you have to experience it too to be able to give it. So
I think it's it's really important to cultivate, especially in the times that we're living in right now, because one of the things that Martha Nussbaum points out, as do other thought leaders, is that when you start hearing words that are dehumanizing to the other, you're losing your grip on compassion. So, you know, to call people criminals, to call people vermin, we know where that goes. We know. So to be compassionate is a radical move right now.
Dean, your hand is up.
I think the second point of Aristotle, that compassion for people who bring suffering upon themselves. And I was thinking Aristotle was not familiar with adverse childhood experience. And I also was thinking about my group. There were many people that had strong Christian philosophy, and part of most people's Christian experiences is that Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is despitefully wicked above all things. Who can know it? So the reality is almost all suffering that comes into our life comes from us. And so if I can only give compassion to people who deserve it because they haven't done their own self damage, I don't share that thought. And I think we're compassionate not because this person doesn't deserve it. But we're compassionate because we're motivated through our values to be compassionate.
I'm going to add to that too. The Stoics also had that idea that you are you are responsible for yourself, therefore you're responsible for everything that happens. You bring it on yourself. And Kant was a little bit that way too. And so you're right. I mean, we have to integrate social knowledge that we have now that we didn't have then at the time of those writings. And I think that's what keeps our faith evolving and keeps it alive and attentive to the times we live in.
Thank you, Ellie. That's great. We've got a couple messages in the box. One from Cindy saying, "We're so pleased. These sessions ground me, inspire, and sustain me for months. Excellent time spent. Thank you for another great session. And thank you to the speakers today. Wonderful, uplifting feeling from this group. Have a great day." So I think we'll bring our time to a close because we've only got a couple minutes. It was great discussion. Again, thank you to Ellie and Linda for their wonderful presentations. Couple things. Again, please, I saw Ogie did email it to everybody too. So we appreciate your feedback so we know what to do for other sessions. We've got a couple other opportunities. There's a workshop on March 20th at noon. The presenter is Francis Maza from Provincial Health in BC, and his topic is Transforming Ethics Beyond Cure to Healing. And Eleanor will be doing another book club on March 26th, and the book is All Things Consoled by Elizabeth Hay. And we thank Ogie very much for keeping us on track and getting us into the rooms and back to our group and helping with the presentation today. And that will be it for our seminar today. So thank you everyone for attending. Take good care and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.